Good morning, ladies and gents. It is extra early today because I have to get into work extra early today, unfortunately. So it kind of throws off my Monday schedule. My Mondays are just kind of going to be like this, at least for a little while. First thing you may notice is the fact that the game looks incredibly different. I moved the main camera view into the little boxy view here. And that, if I turn on the game, you can actually see that's the view that we use. You'll also note that I've kind of resized some of the UI, to match all of this new space that I have. I'm not sure I'm completely happy with it yet. The most interesting part of this change really was just getting the target picker to work when you click here. So if I click on this target over here, I actually get a null reference exception. That's interesting. That's actually really interesting. I shouldn't have. Well, I did have it working last night. I promise. Party UI / party view. Oh, did I change the name of something? Looks like something's name definitely changed. Oh. I have a bug to fix, apparently. That's how I'm going to start this morning. Party UI / party view background. There we go. Not the end of the world, just shifted things around and forgot to update the name. It happens, although it's kind of a telltale sign that something might be wrong, that I changed something, forgot about it, and then when I went to modify it, that it broke. It makes me wonder if the combat UI doesn't need an attachment to something like the party view itself. You'll note that the party view is nothing more than a raw image with the render to texture here, and that is running off of the camera that actually lives with the party. So now we have two cameras in the scene. We've got the game camera that actually runs the UI and everything out here that you see. So right now it actually doesn't even render the world, right? It only has the UI. I'm actually going to go so far as to probably turn everything else in here off. If only because I want to make sure it just shows UI. We clear it to a skybox, mostly out of laziness on my part, but there we go. You'll note that we still have this second 3D space, and that's what this party camera sees. So we've kind of split our cameras off. We've got the one that does the UI, and we've got the one that does the actual rendering. And the one that does the actual rendering has, it's got a smaller viewport. We have to, when we click on this image, we have to take those coordinates and actually click through those coordinates through the camera. Excuse me. My apologies for loud noises. Not quite fast enough on the draw to turn off my mic, or to mute my mic before I cough. I don't know why. My throat's been unhappy. Alright, better. I was able to catch myself this time. So, what do I want to work on today? Because I know I marked myself as random tasks, right? So aside from the bug fix, what else? The party view is... Oh, right. I was fixing the party view stuff. So you'll note I'd find the party view using a view image. I'm not entirely happy with that. I would honestly like either the combat UI to have a copy of the party view. That might be nice. Or for the party to have a reference to the party view so that I could just grab it from it each time. That would be another way to handle this. Party, so it already has a reference to the party UI root. And let's just double check this real quick. Party, here's the party UI root. Yeah, you know what? And the combat UI has access to the party, I'm just trying to make sure I don't store references to things that I don't need to store the references to. I want to make sure that if I store a reference to something, that two things happen. One, that it's either always kept up to date, or that it's fairly short term, so that I don't need to worry about managing it over a long term. The second thing I want to take care of is I want to make sure that wherever I put it not only makes sense, so I don't have tons of copies of it everywhere, but if I can, I want it in the smallest object with the shortest lifespan, such that like I said earlier, I don't want to take care of this in the long term. I don't want to have to play maintenance on it and update it every time something happens. So I'm just trying to think of a way of getting a better marker to that image. And honestly, GameObject.find is not the worst way to do it, but you don't want to GameObject.find usually from root and then go outwards. Because if that goes wrong, if GameObject.find has issues, it tends to like to search the entire tree. Now granted, we've told it it has to be off of root, so it's not the end of the world, but it still is a little iffy in terms of code. It's some of the less reliable code that I've written here, which is why I'm sitting here actually considering putting this somewhere else. It would be nice, at bare minimum. Now I do note that I can actually remove something from here. I can say combat UI dot party dot UI root, or the party UI root. And we can actually remove this first part here, which is a good it's a good cleanup. It's a good start, at least. It removes something from this giant search line, and honestly I prefer that to a lot of other use cases. I'm actually gonna see, I don't think I need to hang on to this reference, and I'm correct. Cool. Alright, that is somewhat cleaner. Not the cleanest thing in the world, but somewhat cleaner. It at least matches, you'll note it matches this line up here. And as much matching as I can do, I'm always happy to kind of handle that. Okay. So that's a little better. And now our combat is going to be a little cleaner. So what else? What else? What is the game missing, I guess? The party can't hold money, at least not yet. Also, nobody has experience, so they can't really level up. When you end a fight, nobody's any different from when they were before. So that's kind of uninteresting. Also, spells don't cost mana right now. That's something that's kind of been on my list for a while, but I still haven't designed it. And design is a great thing to have beforehand. It's like a specification, almost. When you have code that you want to write, it's a lot easier to design for a system that is as complete as possible in your mind, such that you're not either going to over-design the system or even under-design it because you're like unsure what it might need. Also, I can't help but notice that I've never missed with a spell, which means that either my spells hit way too often, or that I just have no defense for spells. I feel the need to look this up right now. Okay, we grab a new opponent. We say cast spell, which is a coroutine. Whoops. Went to the wrong definition. I meant to actually go to the spell definition. And it just rolls damage. It doesn't actually have any defenses. That's unfortunate because it should have some chance of going wrong. I mean, you should be able to miss. There should be some kind of, I don't know, some defense against a spell, right? Having a resistance of some kind to spell, to spells would make sense. Hey, Murkasek. How's it going? It's going well. I'm up a little early, so I'm a little more, I don't know, dreary-eyed than usual, but, went to the Renaissance Fair yesterday, had lots of fun. So, it was all well worth it. Did mean I didn't get to stream yesterday, unfortunately. I did manage to make a bunch of progress on my UI stuff last night, though, just before I passed out. So, progress. So we've got a small laundry list of things to work on. Oh, also, I know combat, I would like, of course, after this is done, I'd like to have a list of enemies. And I've never filled out my stats page. So that's kind of another thing on the long list of things to mess with. Also, why doesn't it say it? Oh, ooh. Okay, I see another bug to fix. You'll note that all the item UI has somehow ended up here instead of underneath our character window, which means our character window is now sitting empty. What is going on here? Let's fix that first, because if this is a bug fixing day, I don't mind that. It means that the game is just that much cleaner for later when I decide to work on new shiny features and I'm a little more awake. What the heck is going on? Let's see here. So, we have the inventory item UI. But that, I'm not seeing anything here in terms of that would mess up. Let's see here. Player character, open inventory. We create an instance of an object. Great. Okay, here's our issue. The parent UI string is old. It's actually still marked with a bunch of information from when the inventory was only inventory. Now there are stats and other things attached to it. And because it has all these shiny new other things, it now has a better hierarchy, but the hierarchy means also that we have to pretty much ensure that everything gets put in correctly. It means we forgot to update things. And by we, I mean I. Let's see here. It's funny, I still call it an inventory UI window, which is pretty much incorrect at this point. So I'm going to refactor this first. Mostly because it's not just an inventory window anymore, and anything that says it's just an inventory UI is kind of blatantly lying, honestly. So this is it's not inventory, it's like an informational UI. And this, character info UI singleton. I like that better. Okay, so from the character info window, I know it's a bit of a long name, but we then can go background, inventory, tab. Actually, it's page, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, inventory page, and then into our backpack slot or other slot. Excuse me. That, or there might be a better way to do this. Yeah, the other thing I can't help but notice is the fact that it uses a certain base to find things. So what we're going to do is change the base, and then we don't have to do as much searching. So for example, if I say the new UI base that I'm going to pass this function is our inventory base, and then I say, well, that's equal to character info UI singleton dot transform dot find child named background inventory page. Just confirm that. Yep, background inventory page. Great. And then now this isn't actually necessary anymore. Makes our job a whole lot easier, and also makes things a lot less likely to break. Something I think anyone sitting in chat can probably associate with. Not wanting things to break is kind of a nice thing. Okay, so that should hopefully fix our, our character stats window problem. Let's throw that out of the scene. The variable info UI has not been assigned in player characters. Of course it hasn't. We changed the name, and unfortunately Unity loves to store things not by an ID but by name, which means that things break quite often, specifically in the realm of, are you the character window? Yeah, you are. Okay. Things break quite often, specifically in the realm of changing names of variables. It's hard for Unity to keep up sometimes. There we go. And now you'll note all his items are sitting in his inventory as we expect them to. If we click on a different character and open their inventory, it will still be relevant. And if we close it, we don't have a ton of open windows. Fantastic. Since I'm poking at this is kind of what I want to continue with for at least part of today, which is unfortunate in some ways because UI I know is not the most interesting thing in the world. Maybe I won't. Let me take a moment to commit my fixes. It's always nice to have bug fixes separated from new features, if only because when something goes wrong, it's easier to look at new features than bug fixes to kind of see what went wrong. So our character info UI singleton now contains a better hierarchy and adjusted code to match. That's really all we did, right? There's nothing else terribly in depth here. We just did some refactoring, and then we also changed the name of like a function or two, and then messed with a couple transforms. That's fine. Nice and easy. Dungeon MMO? Why does everyone want an MMO? No, Junkie, I'm not. I'm not working on an MMO. MMOs are projects for those who don't understand the scope of an MMO. At least if you're an indie developer and working on an MMO, good friggin' luck. Not to say you can't do it, but you'll be spending, the next however many years of your life working on it. And by however many, I'm talking like in the decades. Because honestly, if you can make an MMO in less than 10 years, I'm going to be amazed, at least as a single person team. Unless you're making something along the lines of like MapleStory, and even then, MapleStory is actually pretty complex. Mostly MMOs, the big problem is just so much friggin' content. And then you need servers, and it's too much hard work. I like a single-player game, if only because single-player games, you don't have to fight with that garbage. We'll see. We shall definitely see. Okay, so let's see. I don't want to do UI work because UI work is boring, at least for you guys on stream. FPS? It's not an FPS. There's no shooting going on here. It's a turn. It's kind of a turn-based dungeon crawler. Something along the lines of games such as Wizardry or Legend of Grimrock, or I'm trying to think of other good examples. The problem is good examples are hard to come across. There's a lot of terrible examples, but I don't really want to mention those because they just kind of sour the genre. Alright, so what else? I keep glancing over at my whiteboard, hoping I'd have written something there, but unfortunately when I passed out last night, I didn't have enough time to figure out what I wanted to work on next, which is why I'm kind of floundering today. I've got some content, but most of the stuff I want to work on is kind of boring. I am going to need to start figuring out how to put NPCs into place so that you have someone to talk to and barter with and steal things from and attempt to kill, all that good stuff, get quests from. So I've got that. That's one way to do it. What else do we have? Treasure chests would be kind of nice. Also, picking up loot from fights would be an interesting thing. So why don't we actually dive into that? Hello, uniform. Let's see here. So when you end a fight, right, we need some way to tell what kind of loot is possible. So some kind of loot table needs to exist somewhere. And then we need to figure out what, if anything, we're going to give from that loot table. Now, most of the time, the loot table is probably going to be nothing more than here's some experience, here's some gold, and here's something else, right? We'll just have like money, experience. Those will be always givens. And then whatever other loot comes through, I either want to do by hand or I want to make sure that if we do ration stuff like that out, that when we ration it out, it's kind of based on an old school loot table. Because those should be fairly easy to encode into data that we can make use of. The hard part will be making it... The hard part will be making it Unity friendly, right? All that information in one place doesn't tend to make Unity terribly happy. Unity likes very simple bits of information to be attached to things. And so we could do the loot table based on the grid, right? The same way we did random encounters, where if we look at our, let's actually dive down into our terrain. Really? Okay. Of course I have to, there we go. Well, sensitivity is kind of high. So the same way that our grid, and you'll notice how big our grid is right now, and how our grid has these values. It's got the monster list that you can run into, it has this random encounter chance that you can bump into. It's got a bunch of pieces of information in here. So we might want to put that next to this. So essentially you're going to have monsters of a certain level in a certain area. You'll also have loot of a certain kind in that area too, depending on when we expect you to go through. And that's one way to do it. The other way would be to, That would kind of be the hard-coded version of it. The other thing we could do is we could build an actual system to handle this. And the system would say, okay, you are level X. You should maybe have this many magical items. You have less, so we're going to try and catch you up by giving you a higher chance of getting a magical item drop. That's definitely one way we can do this. And I do like dynamic systems, because dynamic systems at least have a chance of ensuring that the player is always, that they're always at the right power level that we expect them to be at. If they start to fall behind, we start to kind of worry about the player getting into this bad state where, well, they, you know, have some issues playing the game because once their party started to fall behind, they had no way to recover short of like grinding on monsters. And that's not really something we want. We want to try and avoid grinding as a mechanic. I personally absolutely abhor, you know, Final Fantasy level grinding, where it's just like, you just want to be more powerful, and it just feels like it's not because of the number of monsters you killed. It feels like it's because it's terrible excuse me, like it's terrible design that happened. And the terrible design is the only reason why you can't continue and have to spend 8 hours in a game that's otherwise like 5 or 6 hours. So grid group is one place to do it. The one thing about grid grouping is that the grid group kind of keeps us from having the wrong monster show up in the wrong place. And having it, you know, a molten sword show up in a forest seems a little out of place as well, should something like that be what drops from a monster. Granted, grinding, I guess, is always a thing, right? You can always go out, fight monsters, be overpowered for a while, and then just kind of breeze through part of the game. That's just how experience systems kind of work. I think this is something I honestly have to design a little better before I can code, unfortunately. Alright, so let's look into experience then. Experience and money, right? The easy things for us to contribute to. Player characters always have a certain amount of experience. It's pretty dead simple. Okay, so we have a certain amount of experience. We can do this two ways. One can be each time you hit a certain amount of experience. Or the other way to do it is to say, okay, at each of these levels, this is how our experience is going to work. So this is when you are going to level up at each of these levels. I think that's the easier way to handle it, honestly. Which means we need a couple pieces of information here. We have our current level. Maybe we don't need current level as a separately stored thing. I'll think about that. So we have the amount of experience we have, and we're going to have the amount of experience we need per level. Now, I'm not quite so excited about having that be I'm going to leave this a private hard-coded variable. And we'll just say, okay, you get level 1 at 100, and then level 2 at 250, level 3 at 750. Let's see here. I'm just making up numbers off the top of my head. It doesn't really matter a ton. Because I'm going to come back and clean these up later, so I don't really need this to be incredibly accurate. 1, 2, 3, that's good enough. I'm never going to run into those while playtesting. At least not right now. Not until save games get put in. Yeah, that looks good. So we've got our amount of experience. Now, I could, instead of having a standard level up system, do something a little more interesting. We could make this an experience purchase system. So essentially, your number of experience points don't really indicate your level so much as they indicate what you can purchase. So we can say, oh, you can buy skill points for a certain amount of experience. You can buy stat points for a certain amount of experience, right? The downside is that turns off the kind of big win that leveling up tends to be, right? Leveling up tends to be this really kind of congratulatory process where we set off all the kind of we kind of do that that rush of good things all at once. Hey, look, your stats are going up. Hey, why don't you pick new skills? Hey, now that you've picked skills, why don't you get new spells? Like, it's this big process where suddenly the player spikes in power. So I'm not a huge fan of any time that happens, because that is a sharp spike in power, right? And if we do something like random attributes, now the player can game the system, or they can't game the system, but if they need a certain stat and they don't get it when they level up, obviously that's not going to be all that great. Versus if we do things like, say, let a player pick their new stat increases, the new stat increases are going to... a player can game the system. I'm not a huge fan of that. Letting them really mess with their own skill set or their own stats. I'm not a huge fan of that. Once again, this is what I get for not designing any of these systems beforehand. A lot of this stuff is something that I'm kind of... I need to design these better before I come through here and try and code any of them up. Dang it. This is going to be like the day of indecision for me. I can't even pick a friggin' task, so because I can't pick that, I have trouble picking anything else. Okay, well, at least we can have... I'm going to remove the experience per level and the current level stuff, but the experience and then the party as a whole contains money, right? It makes very little sense to have individual party members carry a certain amount of money, because the player will then just end up coalescing it all in order to purchase things. So, let's see here. Rest parameters, movement, rotation. This is kind of its own thing. So we'll make this I don't know, party variables. I'm not feeling terribly creative at the moment, so we'll just call it party variables. And here's our currency held. So this will be pretty straightforward. Always starts at 0. Each time you win a fight, hey, you gain this much money. Hey, all the survivors gained this much experience. It'll be one of those kind of nice moments at the end of a fight where you can say, ah, this is what I gained. And if any items drop, that will be the time that will tell the player, oh, by the way, you got these. So this has to happen when combat ends. Here we go. So, first things first, we need to say if the party is dead, or if the party isn't dead, sorry. What do? We set our text. Makes me wonder if there's an easy way for me to grab that text. Oh, right, action resolution text is a thing. Really? I could have sworn that I had the action resolution text actually taken care of a number of times. Apparently I get pretty close to actually storing it somewhere and then just don't. Let's just actually store that information since that's what we need to be doing. And then we just say the action resolution text. We clear it for the first run because anybody who comes through as a new character to get into a fight, well, we should always have that on hand. So we cleared the text, nice and simple. And that actually saves us a bunch of searching. So I'm always a fan of removing searching from our system. And then we're going to say, yay, everybody survived. So, hey, Stivoid. Since everybody survived, we should say found a certain amount of gold. And we need to data drive this, so honestly, we should say that these numbers here will eventually get pushed out to Unity. Found, and I'm calling it gold right now because I don't have a better name for currency, but eventually we will have to go through and say, okay, we really don't want this to be named gold, we need this other name, and we can put that into a string that's constant throughout the entire game. So if we ever decide to change the name again, if we don't want it to be gold, we want it to be latinum, or if we want it to be platinum or copper or something, it's not hard to do. Stivoid is asking if the crawler is going to be co-op. It's a single player game. In terms of co-op, there's really no like other players to be cooperative with. It's cooperative within your party, but I have a feeling that's not what you were asking. Currency held. Okay, so there's some information. And so we're going to say, hey, look, we found this much gold. And we're going to wait a couple seconds. And then we're going to say, great, you've also gained this much experience. And this should actually not be... it shouldn't be a random thing. We should actually have the amount of experience that someone is worth be part of a monster. So, oh, that's funny. I didn't think about that. This is going to mean different things in different people, and that's going to be a little weird, but that's fine. So, okay, experience as a derived stat, that's great. When we start processing combat, what we're going to have to do is get the total amount of experience everything is worth before we start deleting game objects. So we're going to say for each character, monster, I'll say baddie, in not the initiative list, but our opponent list. Actually, here we go. Better idea. Much better idea. We are going to have... Where does that go? Combat info. Why not? Total experience worth. So that always is going to start at 0. This is going to be private because this is something that actually shouldn't be controlled by the outside world ever. What's going to happen is every time we add a monster to the fight, we're going to say, okay, cool, the total experience worth is equal to the amount of experience that the monster is worth. And so what this does is, if a monster calls another monster into combat, say we have, you know, some kind of like goblin bugler who somehow manages to call other goblins into the fight, this is always going to ensure that as more goblins join the fight, the total experience worth of the fight is going to be going upwards and upwards and upwards. So we say our action resolution text. We can say something along the lines of party members gained, and then we have the experience gained. That much experience. I actually don't need that since total experience worth is its own variable already. And then we say for each player character and characters. I actually kind of do want to say survivors gained that much experience, if only because if a PC is dead, I don't really want them gaining experience, at least not off the top of my head. So if the current health is less than or equal to 0, we're just going to skip them. Otherwise, they get the total experience worth. Ooh, wait, no, they shouldn't get the total experience worth. Surviving character count. Let's just quickly calculate that. So if the PC's current health is greater than or equal to 0, not greater than or equal to, I'm sorry, if it's greater than 0, then we're going to just tack one on, otherwise we're done. Don't really need brackets around that, mostly because it's just a one-line for loop. Don't really care about the contents of it.
Did you bring a file up with you?
No.
Alright.
Alright, finally. The total amount of experience gained is the experience worth of the fight divided by the surviving character count. This shouldn't ever be able to be 0. Because if the party's dead, if the party's dead, we should be skipping this. So that should preclude us having a divide by 0 error, which is fine. We take the amount of experience and we add in the experience gained. And this should actually come in down here. I don't really want to know how much everybody gained as a whole. I'd like to know how much we gained per individual, which would be nice. And then, let's see. Obviously, we need this text to stick around for a couple seconds. So we'll say, let's yield for a couple more seconds to make sure that everything's taken care of. And then we end the game, or we end the combat. let's go beat things up. Let's maximize this too. I just kind of like to bounce around because eventually I'll get into a fight, right? There we go, finally. Okay, so let's beat things up. Cleric, we're going to start you off with fire bolts. And I can't help but notice that some people are incredibly low on stamina, to the point where they might actually pass out if passing out was a thing. Luckily, it's not yet. Ah, crap. Okay, at least clawing doesn't hurt. That's the upside of this whole thing, is that while clawing hits fairly often, luckily it doesn't tend to actually hurt anybody. Hey, we killed a bat. Great. Oh, but nothing's worth any experience. Oh crap. That's actually a completely useless fight. We have to go in here and say, okay, the bat is worth, I don't know, let's say 10 apiece. Let's make it 20 apiece. And the wolf is a little bigger, so let's say those are worth like 45 apiece. I don't know. I don't really honestly care a ton about, whoops, how much it's worth, as long as it's worth a non-zero amount. Oh look, there's a fight. That's nice and quick. Firebolt on you, spell firebolt on you. Cool, we're already one bat down. And the mage is doing a decent amount of damage. Ooh, a bite hit though. Those tend to be, so the way I've essentially structured it right now, claw hits can hit pretty often but don't do a ton of damage. Bite hits do a lot of damage, but because they do so much damage, they're also somewhat hard to hit in comparison. Alright, that's one wolf down. Jess? Alright, and oh, that's going to be painful. More heal wound spells need to go out for these poor guys. Luckily, we've got some spells in that are going pretty well. You know, hey, we found gold, we gained experience, and we're done. The texture bits are messing with the zoom out? Not really. Not that I know of. It might just be the fact that the stream is a lower quality than what I see. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't look too bad. And we can rest up and get everything back. And if I go in and check on my player characters now, you'll note that they have 32 experience apiece, which is a pretty good deal. Alright, so we've got a basic feature tossed in. We did a bunch of fixing this morning. That's great. Thank you guys for joining me. I have to hop off. As I said, I have to run to work fairly early today. If you want to see my earlier videos, see how I got to this point, there's a YouTube channel linked below where you can see all the videos of how I got to this point. If you really liked what you saw and if you want to see more, I encourage you, please hit the follow button below. It's always great to have more support from folks who are interested in this sort of thing. And it's always fun to have more people along for the ride. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you have a great day. I'll be back online tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I do that Tuesday through Friday. So hopefully I'll see you guys then. Thanks for joining.